NASCAR concludes a historic rain tire test at Martinsville Speedway. We'll hear what the drivers had to say about it. And North Wilkesboro Speedway, that's right, that North Wilkesboro Speedway may have a high-profile investor. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. I hope you all have had a great week, holiday weekend, Easter weekend. I hope everyone is doing well. We've got a lot of NASCAR news to catch up on today. A lot of things have happened the last couple of days that could have huge implications regarding NASCAR's future. But before we discuss all the news, today's episode is sponsored by Alka Seltzer. Alka Seltzer starts neutralizing acid in seconds for heartburn relief. It's also perfect to combat indigestion or upset stomachs. Alka Seltzer is a household name, a trusted brand for years. Longtime supporters of Out of the Groove, Alka Seltzer from Bayer is available at Walmarts everywhere. So if you're not feeling 100%, head to your local Walmart, pick up some Alka Seltzer. Huge supporters of Out of the Groove and of racing. Thank you to Alka Seltzer for sponsoring this episode of Out of the Groove. Let's begin today's journey by discussing the recent tire tests that took place at Martinsville Speedway over the last 48 hours or so. This was not an April Fool's joke. No, NASCAR yesterday tested rain tires at Martinsville Speedway, an oval track. You know, rain tires are still a fairly new invention in the world of NASCAR road course racing. They've been around for a little more than a decade, but we haven't seen them used, at least on the Cup Series side, very much. NASCAR this week began testing rain tires on ovals, something I don't think many of us expected NASCAR to seriously consider doing in our lifetimes, but lo and behold, here we are. So Kyle Larson and Chris Buescher were at Martinsville yesterday. NASCAR brought out the water truck because, of course, naturally it was a perfectly sunny day for this rain test, wet the track down and started turning laps. Apparently they tested a few different types of tires, including basically the rain tires they use at road courses right now. They gathered up all sorts of data, and then afterwards Kyle Larson briefly talked about how he felt in the car driving on an oval on rain tires, as well as John Probst from NASCAR. He gave even more insight about the next steps, whether or not this test was a success, whether or not it was a failure. He shared his thoughts as well. First, let's hear from Kyle Larson. This was posted to NASCAR's official Twitter account.
Honestly, didn't drive like way different. You could still slow down good, turn good. Drive off was easy to spin your tires, but other than that, it was kind of fun to chase the grip throughout the portions when it would start drying. So it was pretty fun, and yeah, I mean, I think they've got a good product that we could honestly start racing with right away if we needed to on these short tracks. So good day testing here in Martinsville, ready to come back next week and hopefully have a fast car and do a good job.
Kyle Larson's pretty bullish there. He says straight up that he believes they could use these tires in a race today. I mean, he said it. That's not me paraphrasing. That's exactly what he said. So Kyle Larson must have liked what he felt. You'll notice in some of these clips you'll see, I mean, the track is clearly dark. It's clearly damp. How wet is it? I don't know. It doesn't look like there's any, sort of standing puddles. So it's not like these tires were tested in torrential downpour conditions, but a little bit of moisture here and there certainly is going to affect the way the cars handle, especially at an oval track, even a slow oval track like Martinsville Speedway. But you heard it from Kyle Larson right there. He liked what he felt. He feels like they could run these tires in a race today if push came to shove. NASCAR's John Probst, in charge of this sort of thing, was a bit more analytical, a bit more reserved in his commentary. Here's some of what he had to say following this first ever oval rain tire test, at least in the last 30 years. From John Probst, I think that we just need a little bit of time to go through all of the data to figure out what are the next best steps. I would say that we continue the journey, and it looks positive for now. Today could have ended it, but it certainly didn't do that. I feel like everyone involved felt like it was a very positive test, but it's still fresh and certainly a very, very good first step. So even Probst sounds pretty optimistic by what they saw during that test yesterday. He doesn't quite go the same route Kyle Larson did. He's not ready to promise, hey, we'll see these tires this year, but he certainly sounds optimistic, and it sounds like they're going to continue their research and development and continue this project, if you will. So really interesting to hear both the driver and the executive's perspective on this whole thing. Could we realistically see NASCAR race on an oval track in wet conditions. That sounds like that's the plan. Things are heading that direction. Steve O'Donnell said earlier this week that the plan behind this test was first to see if it could even handle Martinsville, one of the slowest tracks on the schedule. But if things went well, Steve O'Donnell was opening it up to, hey, we could run rain tires maybe at other, 1 mile or shorter flat tracks. He mentioned, Richmond, Phoenix, New Hampshire perhaps. We're not going to see rain tires at the high-speed intermediate or super speedway tracks anytime soon, maybe ever. But at least opening the door up to the short tracks or the 1 mile and shorter tracks, at least some of them. Maybe not Dover, where that place is like a roller coaster, super fast, high bank. Maybe not Dover, but again, he said Loudon, he said Phoenix. This is a bigger project than just trying to run at Martinsville Speedway in the rain or in wet conditions. Because if you're just worried about one track, if this was only going to work at Martinsville, I don't think it would be a worthwhile investment on NASCAR or Goodyear's behalf to invest all that money into researching something that can be only used at one track on the entire schedule. It wouldn't make much sense from a financial standpoint. But the goal is to reduce the length of weather-related red flags at a variety of racetracks, several tracks on the circuit. Of course, road courses can already be run in fairly wet conditions, as the Xfinity cars proved last year. Now trying to broaden that to include some ovals, that seems to be NASCAR's goal. And again, to reduce the length of red flags. There are certainly severe weather conditions that NASCAR could still not race on. Doesn't matter what kind of tires you put on the cars. But at least now they're hoping that they won't have to wait for the track to be completely dry, which can take hours and hours to resume racing. That's good for fans in attendance. That's good for fans and TV partners at home if NASCAR is able to get the race in as close to its scheduled, start time as possible. This whole test and everything really came out of nowhere. It just came flying in out of left field last week all of a sudden, but I'm supporting it. If NASCAR can confidently work with Goodyear to design a reliable tire that will hold up on oval tracks in wet or slick conditions, heck, that's awesome. That's fantastic if they're able to successfully do this. This could lead to some procedural concerns that I may have questions about, like, say, in the middle of a race at Martinsville, it starts raining. Will NASCAR throw a competition caution like they did at the Daytona road course kind of screwy earlier this year and give teams a chance to then switch into rain tires, or will they let the teams figure it out for themselves? They'll probably throw the competition caution, but now that opens up a whole new can of worms, because I think everyone agrees they shouldn't have thrown a competition caution at the Daytona road course because it really never rained hard. None of the teams switched to wet tires. That was clearly an attempt to manipulate the race and add some excitement down the stretch. We all addressed that at the time. I was very critical of NASCAR at the time. So now we're opening up Pandora's box and giving NASCAR perhaps more opportunities to make those kinds of questionable decisions, so we'll see. That's one question I have. Also, are they able to use these tires in race if it's actively raining? Obviously, if it's not like a torrential downpour, and if there's lightning, of course, they have to red flag the race anyways, but if it's, a very steady rain, but not, blinding, will they still be able to race? Like, what's going to happen? Are they going to red flag the race and give the teams the chance to come in and install windshield wipers and the motors and all that? Is that something that can be done in a reasonable amount of time? Are these tires only going to be used in a situation where it's not actively raining, but the track is still damp, in which case it feels like that's a very specific set of circumstances, perhaps? Like, I still have some procedural questions about how this will work. I'm sure NASCAR doesn't even have the answers yet to a lot of those questions, but those are things that they're going to have to figure out, and I just have a feeling the first time we see these tires used in competition, a lot of these questions will need to be answered, and I'm sure it won't go quite as smoothly, the first few times it happens. Hopefully, eventually they figure things out. But these are just some basic questions I have. Again, they're nitpicky type questions, but it's certainly not to say that they shouldn't try to introduce rain tires at ovals. Again, anything that allows NASCAR to fight back against Mother Nature and get races in closer to their scheduled start time as much as possible, I'm fully in support of that. But we'll see. This sounds like this first test was very good, but it sounds like there are more tests coming down the pipeline before we see these tires in real race action. Let me know how you guys feel about NASCAR and rain tires on ovals down in the comments below. Now, we've got to talk about North Wilkesboro Speedway. That's right, North Wilkesboro Speedway, the short track in North Carolina that hosted NASCAR Cup Series races from NASCAR's first ever season in 1949 all the way up into as recently as 1996. Of course, the track has been closed entirely since 2011, nearly a decade now. Much of the facility has fallen into disrepair, but the track is still owned by Speedway Motorsports, one of the two major companies that own the vast majority of tracks on the NASCAR schedule. Marcus Smith, the CEO, president, God emperor of Speedway Motorsports, was on Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s podcast earlier this week, and he let slip this little detail that seemed to blow Dale Jr.'s mind.
I just want to let you know that we haven't forgotten about North Wilkesboro. We haven't given up on it.
What?
What does that even mean?
What? Yeah,
It just means that we're
The wheels are turning all the ways.
I'm thinking we're working on it. No promises, but we have not forgotten about it.
Marcus Smith assuring Dale Jr. that there is still hope for the .625 mile short track, that historic facility in North Carolina. Certainly got Dale Jr. quite giddy, and I'm sure excited a lot of fans who heard that little tease. You know, people have been talking about bringing North Wilkesboro Speedway back for a number of years. There's the whole Save the Speedway movement, but nothing has really come out of it at this point. The track continues to slip further and further away, aside from the occasional peak like last year when Dale Earnhardt Jr. and iRacing were able to scan the facility and bring it into the virtual world, and they ran that Pro Invitational race there. Other than the occasional glimpse of hope, a glimpse of sign of life, North Wilkesboro has not seen a whole lot of progress. Really no progress at all has been done to the facility itself. So while it's great to hear Marcus Smith say that things, I'm sure a lot of fans were a bit skeptical, and to many fans those words did not ring very true. However, a new player has entered into the fold. On Twitter earlier this week, Camping World CEO Marcus Lemonis is at it again. He replied on Twitter to a video of Smith talking about North Wilkesboro, tweeting, "Tell @MarcusSMI to call me." Oh boy, when Marcus Lemonis gets you on the phone, I know this is confusing with a lot of Marcuses, but when Marcus Lemonis gets you on the phone, you know he means serious business. This is the same guy that just a couple weeks ago sponsored like a third of the Truck Series field at Las Vegas. There was like a dozen Camping World trucks. The dude is just throwing money around, investing heavily into the sport of stock car racing. He's been great to the Truck Series, and right now he's doing some pretty great things for the world of NASCAR. I mean, he was on Daniel Suarez's Cup car at Bristol this weekend and almost won that race. Marcus Lemonis calls out Marcus Smith. Apparently, they actually did have a phone conversation earlier this week, because yesterday morning, Marcus Smith tweeted in response, "Great call this morning. Thanks, Marcus, for your passion for bringing people together around racing." Also yesterday, Marcus Lemonis, the Camping World Marcus, tweeted this photo out, and he said, "Camping World is ready to open store and some other stuff in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. Cough, cough, at Marcus Smith." Oh man, something is definitely happening. Some gears are turning behind the scenes. What's going on here? What did Marcus Smith and Marcus Lemonis talk about? Now, there were some people, including fellow YouTuber David Land, who said what I think a lot of people were jokingly thinking. He tweeted, "What if Marcus Lemonis is actually just going to buy North Wilkesboro and then demolish it and build a Camping World in its place?" Yeah, that could have been really funny. That'd be a good plot twist. Well, Marcus Lemonis actually replied to David Land on Twitter and reassured him that no, that is not the plan. So all we have to go off of are a few tweets right here, but they're tweets from very powerful, wealthy individuals. And these tweets do clearly indicate that Marcus Lemonis is interested in using his Camping World brand to perhaps invest into North Wilkesboro Speedway and perhaps help restore it or reimagine it into a modern day racing venue that could perhaps bring NASCAR back at some point or another. So that's pretty exciting. For any longtime fan of North Wilkesboro Speedway, anyone who wants to see another classic short track restored to its former glory or some other kind of glory, this is pretty exciting. It's starting to feel real at this point when the two Marcuses with deep, deep pockets start bantering about it on Twitter. So, of course, we don't know what's going to come out of this. Could ultimately end up being nothing, but certainly some gears again are turning behind the scenes. Anyway, does bringing North Wilkesboro Speedway back, though, even make any sense? Everyone's caught up in the whole, Marcus Smith, Marcus Lemonis might pour a bunch of money in and reinvigorate the North Wilkesboro Speedway, that nobody's stepped back and actually thought, at least that I've seen, doesn't make business sense, doesn't make any sort of sense to spend all that money on North Wilkesboro Speedway in this day and age. I could fall on either side of this issue. I don't want to sound like a hater, but I'm just going to be objective. North Wilkesboro Speedway, it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It is in North Carolina, a NASCAR hotbed. Most NASCAR fans, at least on a per capita basis, are based in North Carolina, so certainly I'm sure it would be a hit with fans in the immediate surrounding area. But if we actually look at what's in the surrounding area, I mean, the closest major city is Charlotte, North Carolina, but it's like an hour and a half away. I mean, Bristol Motor Speedway is like 2 hours away. There's another pretty popular short track not too far away. Does it really make sense to pour all this money into a track in North Wilkesboro? I don't know. Keep in mind, almost the entire facility would need to be rebuilt. I mean, yes, it helps that I guess SMI owns the land, owns that space, but the track itself, from the safer barriers that would need to be just straight up installed, new catch fence, new track surface. Obviously they need to build a new garage area, a new media center, and don't even get me started on the grandstands. Those things would need to be almost entirely demolished and rebuilt from the ground up. If you're spending all the money to basically build a brand new track from scratch anyways, why not build it somewhere that might attract a larger crowd in the long term? Because I'm a bit worried that, hey, first race back in North Wilkesboro. North Wilkesboro's back. It's been reimagined. It's a historic track, one of NASCAR's originals. That's going to sell tickets. It will sell out, or sell very nearly out. I'll bet its first couple of years in operation. But 5-10 years later, is North Wilkesboro going to continue to be a mainstay on the NASCAR schedule? Are fans going to continue to turn out to North Wilkesboro every single year? I wouldn't say that's a guarantee. I mean, if the racing is fantastic, maybe, but I would not say that's a guarantee. Bristol has fantastic racing just a couple hours away, and the spring date has struggled for years now. Part of me thinks if Speedway Motorsports is involved, why not, tear down Kentucky and build a, North Wilkesboro-esque short track where Kentucky Speedway stands. You already own that land, and that track is located right between Louisville and Cincinnati, and those Kentucky fans feel a little overlooked at the moment with their track being taken off the schedule. Why not, if you're going to build a whole new track from scratch, why not build it where Kentucky sits? That's maybe what I'm thinking in the back of my head. I don't know if that makes more sense, but in my head it kind of seems like it would. Not to mention, since Kentucky is currently a bigger track, I mean, if you build a short track in its place, you have all this extra space, kind of like what they're going to do with Auto Club. They're going to use a lot of that extra space that used to be racetrack for other things to make money. So these are just real concerns I have. Again, I don't want to sound like a hater, because I'll be honest, I'd love to see North Wilkesboro come back. I'm not particularly nostalgic. I mean, NASCAR has never raced there in my lifetime. I was born after North Wilkesboro Speedway was taken off the Cup Series schedule, so I'm not particularly nostalgic for the track. I think in a lot of ways, if SMI, if Marcus Lemos, if they're able to bring North Wilkesboro Speedway back and NASCAR is able to add it to the Truck, Xfinity, or Cup Series schedule, you could view it as NASCAR's gift to their hardcore, long-time, old-school fans. Because while I'm often supportive of NASCAR's attempts to reach new audiences, attempts to try something different, especially in this day and age, at the same time, I don't want NASCAR to completely forget about the hardcore fans, the regions of the country, the places that got them to where they are today. I think in a lot of ways, this could be a very well-received act of goodwill towards those old school fans if they were to bring North Wilkesboro Speedway back. It's a gift to the old school fans, if you will. There are plenty of fans that love North Wilkesboro that would love to see it come back. You have powerful people like, obviously, Marcus Smith, Marcus Lemos, but also Dale Earnhardt Jr., who've long supported North Wilkesboro and the idea of it coming back one day. The iRacing event last year was very well received. Again, the track is located, while it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, it is in North Carolina, a NASCAR state, the NASCAR state, if you will. So while I do have some long-term questions, and I think my questions are very legit and deserve to be addressed, or at least considered, I'm certainly not opposed to North Wilkesboro being added back to the Cup Series schedule, and it could be the perfect racetrack to offset many of the new changes. NASCAR's adding all these road courses. They're going to new cities like Austin, like Nashville. They're going potentially street racing in the coming years. They're already doing that iRacing event this year. They're teasing a real world street race. They're doing all these things that NASCAR fans in the 70s, 80s, and 90s probably wouldn't have thought possible or realistic, or at least wouldn't have considered NASCAR doing, but NASCAR is doing them now in an attempt to sort of appease and even show their support for many of the older school fans, or fans that have supported NASCAR for years and years before its recent new age. Bringing North Wilkesboro Speedway back could be huge, could be really important, could fill that void, fill that gap, and be kind of a gift to the fans that have helped get NASCAR to where it is today. So I'm not opposed to it. That's why I didn't want to sound like a hater. In fact, I'm fully supportive of North Wilkesboro Speedway being restored. I just wonder if in the long term it actually makes the most sense. I think it does, but I could be convinced either way. Certainly some questions that should be considered, but there you have it. What do you guys think about this? Do you think it's realistic that Marcus Lemonis and Marcus Smith are able to team up and bring North Wilkesboro back? Will it look different than it did before? Will it look basically the same, but with a new paint job and better grandstands? We'll have to wait and see if anything comes out of this. If, big if. But let me know what you guys think of that Twitter exchange. That's all I've got for this episode of Out of the Groove. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. We talk NASCAR almost daily here on this channel. As always, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters as well. Couldn't do this show without your continued support. I hope everyone has a fantastic Easter weekend. Still plenty to talk about before NASCAR returns in about a week at Martinsville Speedway. Remember, that's a Saturday night race for the Cup Series, so not even quite a full week. It's a short week for us NASCAR fans, but an off weekend nonetheless. Hope everyone has a great time. I will see you again very, very soon.